we can understand that there's a system of oppression that's affecting humanity because we're all indirectly affected by whatever affects someone directly.
A lot of people try the whole pull yourselves up by your bootstraps thing and look what I did, look where I've come. Well, you know, you can say that and that's fine and wonderful as long as you're still acknowledging that there is a corrupt system that caused this mess to start with.
Absolutely.
You know?
If people are marching against the system will literally go out of its way to fund the march, pay for the march, and then guess what? All you can talk about on the march is what the system tells you to talk about. Hi, welcome back to Gotta Be Podcast. Gotta Be Me Podcast. We're so happy to be here again with you today. We're your hosts. My name is Sophia Benyon, and this is my cousin, Peyton Benyon.
Welcome back to our channel, everybody. If you are new here, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're old here, please tell 10 of your best friends about this podcast so we can get more views and subscribers. We'll appreciate it so much. So, as you might know, if you have been staying on top of it and keeping track of the episodes, we have started a series about the book Hustlin backwards. Don't look at mine, look at hers, because mine is beaten up and ugly. Oh my. And very well loved. Actually, a little bit well loved and a little bit not well made. They made new ones.
Yeah, this copy is like the second edition or whatever is like way nicer material and everything.
This is my chapter 1. All right here. But so we decided we're going to talk about the first chapter. Don't leave right now. I'm serious. It's going to be interesting. It is an interesting chapter. I really love the first chapter, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So the title of it is called Oppressive Comparisons. Can you let us know what is this chapter about? What sticks out to you?
So I feel like, first of all, I should say that like the chapter 1 is like a foundation for understanding the whole book. And if you can understand chapter 1 and like if you can assimilate it and think about it, and to me I think it makes a lot of sense. He uses a lot of quotes from Dr. King and things that help tie it together, but if you can understand chapter 1, I feel like then from there you can build a really good foundation for understanding the rest of the book. And I do want to re-emphasize that we're not here to interpret what he said or try to, you know, even necessarily explain what he said. We're just talking about what this book has meant to us, how it's affected us, how it's helped us in our minds and things like that. So Oppressive Comparisons, just kind of an overview, just in general, just kind of like together and like the topic all over. Oppressive Comparisons is speaking to when people start talking about, actually when they talk about oppression and you know, basically how my people have been more oppressed than your people, or this demographic has suffered more than that demographic.
So, like, for example, what will happen is someone will start saying something about the oppression that happened during slavery, right? And then you have somebody pop up and say, oh, that is nothing like what the Jewish people went through whenever Hitler came through. And then someone else will pop up and be like, well, we shouldn't even be talking about that. Have you even seen the statistics on what happened to the indigenous peoples of North America? And then the other people are like this. And then really we end up getting nowhere because we're just so busy trying to prove who has been more oppressed.
And in that way, comparing was what I wanted to say.
You know?
Comparing oppressions becomes oppressive. So I think, yeah, Oppressive Comparisons is like a great title. So in other words, we're not here, you know, to talk about who was more oppressed and whose people. And like she mentioned, was it the indigenous peoples, or was it the Jews, or was it the Irish in the potato famine, or was it the African Americans, or was it the people? You know, there's been oppressions literally everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And it's happened to so many people. So many people have been wronged. But what we learned is so helpful about understanding the oppression of the African American and understanding slavery is that it gives us a view of oppression in a super refined state. I'll just read what Brother Stephen wrote here in his book. He said he's not making an argument as to what people or ethnic group has experienced the most brutalization or tyranny, right? Like that's not even the discussion. And this viewpoint is not a license to subscribe to a crippling and oppressive victim mentality either. So we're not, neither are we trying to say, oh, you know, we're just victims and we can't help anything that we've ever done. We just have to do it because we've been oppressed.
I think people get stuck on a victim mentality because people accuse other people of having a victim mentality, and they want to use that to exonerate the system of any culpability. But then there's people who genuinely do completely lean on the system at like a failed system as a crutch. Well, I can't do anything. Well, I can't. So I think it's like important to be really balanced there, because a lot of people try the whole pull yourselves up by your bootstraps thing and look what I did, look where I've come. Well, you know, you can say that and that's fine and wonderful as long as you're still acknowledging that there is a corrupt system that caused this mess to start with.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. So the quote I was trying to get to was, he says, the object of, you know, this book and of talking about oppression and everything, the object is rather to begin to draw the minds of our readers to oppression in its most refined state. So if we can view oppression through the lens of slavery, or like in my experience,
African slave.
Right. When I began to understand how the system worked, and, you know, not just the physical bringing over of the slaves on the slave ships to America, but the mind games and the way that they
psychological effects.
Right, the way they set brother against brother and told, you know, basically told the poor white man, at least you're not black. And kept both of them under in that way. You know, when you begin to understand the systemicness of it and how, you know, there's a reason that the statistics about the black community are the way they are. And it's not like...
It's not an accident. It's not coincidental.
Right. And it's so refined, because here we are 400 years down the road and the black community is still deeply suffering. And I'm just trying to say that when you can understand oppression through that, then you can be like, oh,
you can understand anything.
I see how it works over there, and now that makes sense what they were probably trying to do over there, and it gives clarity to what's happening there. And I feel like there was a good quote from Dr. Cornel West about that. Did you have that?
I have it right here. So basically, he's just kind of re-emphasizing the point about. He says, I'll just read it straight because he's. What am I saying? Just read it straight.
I'm just going to read it. And then he said that we were going to read the thing. So then we read the part right there. Then we directly read it. Immediately, we're going to read it right now. We're about to read it, and you're going to hear us read it.
I could not get out. I was like, you know,
He literally had it underlined and everything.
I know. I was literally trying so hard to read it, but like other words kept coming out of my mouth.
I'm going to read it straight there. Right there.
Straight right here. Okay, anyways. Yes, so Dr. Cornel West comes to our aid in re-emphasizing the point. He says it is not because black people have a monopoly on suffering, not at all. But in the formation of the United States, the fundamental threat to the status quo is when you fall in love with black people. When you're concerned about their plight and predicament, and you make it central and fundamental to your analysis of class and empire and gender and homophobia and so forth. So basically he's saying you can apply this to everything from here, because basically in American society, if you ever read any of Robin DiAngelo's books, it's really good. She talks about this country's foundational anti-blackness. And so basically to fall in love with what the system is anti would be a uber threat to this sort of a system. So that's why he says it like that.
And the resistance that you would get when you find yourself standing up to that system, whether intentionally or unintentionally, the resistance you would get would be such an eye-opener, or such a potential eye-opener to you, like, oh, there's a way bigger thing working here, and hold up, it's working over here, it's working over here, it's working over there, right?
Absolutely.
So oppression is not just, you know, random, you know, acts of violence against, you know, and I think Brother Stephan mentions that and has helped us to understand that it's not just random acts of violence against, you know, people like that you just see pop up. It's actually all connected, because we as human beings are all connected. And you can't, you know, you can't just say, you can't talk about them and their oppressions. That's really so out of context, because that would, you know, that's where the term racism, I feel like, even has a foundation. The imagination that there actually are different races, and there's, as opposed to one human race, and that this race has been affected by that over there, and that poor race, the abuses that they have suffered, when that's all an intentional misnomer to get us thinking about in them versus us terms instead of us terms, and realizing that if you're being oppressed, or if someone over here is being oppressed, we're all affected by this oppression. I feel like Dr. King had such a good quote about that.
He says it the most eloquently.
He does. And I think one time we were having a history class with Brother Stephen, and he said we should memorize it. Okay, I found it. It says, Dr. King says, no individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. And as long as we try, the more we're going to have war in this world. And we must either learn to live together as brothers, or we're all going to perish together as fools. Yes, as nations and individuals, we are interdependent. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. And this is the part we had to memorize. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. We're made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. So we can't go around talking about, like I already mentioned, the oppressions of others without including ourselves. Basically, I feel like what Dr. King is saying and Brother Stephen is saying is that the interrelatedness of humanity, first of all, means that we're all affected by, whatever affects each other, either directly or indirectly. But that also means that there has to be a structure, a system, a lot of people have been using that word, in place that affects everyone, if that makes sense. So I feel like the scripture talks about it. If we go over to Revelation, which I know a lot of people are scared of Revelation, but I love Revelation.
We grew up on
Revelation. And it's not that I feel like I could explain every single thing that's in there, but I feel like we do have a lot of knowledge about a lot of it because we've been taught, and I'm definitely not afraid of Revelation like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Comment if you want us to do a series on Revelation. I feel like that'd be so interesting.
Yeah, I love Revelation.
Anyway, in Revelation 17, it describes the system as a beast. It's a beastly system. And it's a very apt description because it talks about, the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the crowns on the horns, and it describes it, as a horse sitting on many waters on this beast. And if you understand it as a beast with like these different heads that kind of like work in different ways.
But still stemming from the same
location, the same system. But the trick is, at that point, the heads can trick you because they can have you fighting one head while you're completely swallowed up by another. And you don't even know it.
I always think about right wing and left wing. People be and the left wing is horrible, and the right wing is, I'm like, yo, no, this is the same thing. I was just talking to somebody about that this week.
You're swallowed up by it. And as long as the beast can keep you, like doing like small time jobs like that, like attacking another head when you're not attacking the body, the root of it, then it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
As long as it can keep you distracted, like looking over here and looking over there, and we gotta fight that part. That is the evil. This is the thing that we should focus on. Well, if we're only focusing on that, then you're probably getting swallowed up by some other form of the oppression that you're maybe seeing.
And that's what really makes the system so tricky, right? Because as soon as they see an insurrection, what do? They start assimilating it. That's what King Nebuchadnezzar did.
Right.
He said he saw the image and he saw all the different things that it was, and then he said, all right, I know what I'll do. I'll reinterpret it, and I'll make it my own. But
I'll make the whole thing.
Right, God don't work like that. But yeah, that's how the system works, and that's how often Brother Stephen preached a message a while back, and he talked about stealing a march. So that's what some of that happened in the civil rights movement when we talk about that. And if you go look, you can see Dr. King talk about it. Because
later on in his life.
Yes, there was an insurrection and there was a rebellion, and the system saw that and said, oh, let's get in front of that.
They were actually attacking the system. They were beginning to attack the system at the root. They were beginning to see, okay, wait, this is not just issue of civil rights. This is a
Human
issue. This is the issue of human rights. They're oppressing us. They're oppressing our white brothers.
Right.
We have to attack. And when the system saw that,
And you hear Malcolm X talk about it. He says it turned into a circus. It turned into a zoo. It turned into a picnic. And he was absolutely right. And at the end of his life, you hear Dr. King talk about it, and he said, my dream has turned into a nightmare.
And I feel like people don't know that.
That's how this system works, right?
Absolutely. And if you think about, and literal marches, what does the system do? If people are marching against the system will literally go out of its way to fund the march, pay for the march, and then guess what? All you can talk about on the march is what the system tells you to talk about. And that way, you've been totally eaten up. We can't make a big difference. We should always cry out against oppression. I believe that every chance we get. I'm not speaking against that. What I'm saying is we have to be careful that while we're crying out about, one part of oppression that we see, we're not being swallowed up by some other form of this system.
And that's why the Bible says, come out of her, my people, right? In
Right,
Revelation, and then the next chapter, over.
The very next chapter, come out of her, because it can't be healed. It's not a beast in the scriptures is often not a good thing. A beastly thing is not a good thing. And so you can't heal a beast. You can't fix. It's a beast. Yeah. A beast needs to be killed. We need a whole new situation right there. There was another quote that he writes right in the beginning that I forgot that I wanted to mention, which to me also gives a very important foundation for understanding the book. He says, Brother Stephen Hargrave says, history is prophecy. No. I always say it backwards. Prophecy is history foretold, and history is prophecy fulfilled. I'm going to say that again because I feel like it's so important.
Go ahead.
Prophecy is history foretold, and history is prophecy fulfilled. So when we view history and oppression and everything through a prophetic lens, this gives us clarity of understanding, right, on it, because they're one and the same, really. So we can see from scripture and from history how these systems have worked in oppression of humanity. I feel like that there was a time when Protestantism prevailed. And I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm not talking about true Christianity. I'm talking about the system of Protestantism.
Right.
And I feel like that was particularly during the time of slavery. So I think as we discuss slavery and as we understand oppression through slavery,
understand how religion
we're going to have to talk about Protestantism.
Used to oppress. Like, for example, you have examples of things like they brought slaves over on a 700-ton vessel, and it was called the good ship Jesus. Like, how
what is that?
Much more ironic can you get? Like, you literally think, like, Jesus, like, what would Jesus have to do with that brutalness? What would Jesus have to do? Right, so then you have things like that just put things in our mind.
And you can almost understand when people are
like kind of anti-Christian, especially in the Black culture. And I think we've held on to church for the most part, and we've been a people that has clung to Jesus when times have gotten rough.
Right.
But if there aren't any anti-Christian sentiments coming from a place like this, you can understand why, because a system like this has portrayed itself in a way and kind of played that it was true Christianity when it was not, which is a deep form of oppression, right?
It's the deepest, because it's taking the purest thing, the love of Christ, which should work together, work through humanity to pull everyone out of oppression. It's taking that and making it the cover. It's not the real love of Christ, obviously, but making the name of it the cover for their oppression. And that's part of what makes that oppression so refined.
I was just reading, I am in a literature class right now, and I was just reading, my first assignment was to analyze Christopher Columbus's letter to King Ferdinand and Isabel, right? And just like the way that he spoke, like this is the Lord's victory, that we overtake these people, these savages. And just reading what he said about and how he used Christianity basically as a foundation for him he felt morally superior, he felt mentally superior, psychologically superior, and he used his faith as a foundation to oppress other people, which is just intense.
Which is, to me, it's evil.
Yeah.
And this is another reason we have to use the scripture. We have to use prophecy to understand history. We have to understand what they were doing and how that was a deep abuse of
I
the
understand,
people.
like, that was not a part of the narrative. What
Right.
Christopher Columbus said was not a part of God's narrative. Do you see that in prophecy? No, you don't. So then that is not what's there. That's
And
not the real
Columbus
thing.
was among the ones, that brought the sword or the cross, and that was even before Protestantism.
Right.
But Protestantism just kept right on continuing it, and we've talked about it before. How they took all the sections out of the Bible that talked about slaves being free before they gave it to the slaves, and how the only scriptures they could find to preach to the slaves somehow were slaves obey your masters. So Protestantism just picked right up where the Catholicism left off and continued the oppression. And I think if we can understand that, there's a system of oppression that's affecting humanity because we're all indirectly affected by whatever affects someone directly. So this oppression is affecting everybody, and it's in systems that are insidious and that are refined and that we can't just see, necessarily, especially if we've never had to think about it.
So we should not get caught up in the trick of the system, which would be to compare oppressions. We should instead choose to look at it from the lens where we can most easily see it and just work from that standpoint, because that is the fastest, easiest way to do it.
And as the oppression of the African American and slavery has become the most refined state, that is the way the Hustlin Backwards looks at oppression, and that's the way that we will continue to talk about it as we work through Hustlin Backwards. We're going to hopefully go through it chapter by chapter, and we hope so much that you all continue to enjoy these discussions. Y'all know what time it is. Peace, love, and hair grease.